A quiet transformation destroys an empath long before anyone notices it. Not physically, not loudly, but emotionally. Deep inside, little by little, the person they used to be slowly disappears. Most people will never understand these three life phases because empaths experience life differently from everyone else. They do not simply hear emotions, they absorb them. They carry tension that does not belong to them. They feel energy shifts in rooms before a single word is spoken. And after years of giving, understanding, forgiving, and emotionally surviving, their personality begins to change in ways even they cannot explain. Many empaths spend years believing they are becoming cold, distant, or emotionally unstable, when the truth is far more painful. What they are actually experiencing is emotional evolution created by repeated disappointment, silent burnout, emotional overload, and years of carrying feelings nobody else could see. The terrifying part is that this transformation usually happens in stages, and phase 2 is where most empaths emotionally collapse without anyone realizing it. This is the phase where the empath begins losing trust in people, losing energy for conversations, losing the desire to explain themselves, and slowly disconnecting from the world around them. Many people mistake this stage for weakness or depression, but psychologists have linked deep emotional exhaustion in highly sensitive individuals to long-term emotional overstimulation and chronic empathy fatigue. In simple words, the empath's nervous system eventually becomes overwhelmed from feeling too much for too long. That is why many empaths suddenly become quieter with age. They stop chasing people. They stop over-explaining. They stop trying to rescue everyone around them. And the strange part is that most of this change happens silently. Friends notice it, family notices it, but almost nobody understands what truly caused it. In this video, you will discover the 3 emotional life phases most empaths go through, why phase 2 emotionally breaks so many sensitive people, and how the final phase completely changes the empath forever. You will also learn why empaths often feel emotionally older than everyone around them, why they attract emotionally draining people so easily, and why pain changes an empath more deeply than it changes most people. Some of these emotional patterns are rarely talked about, yet millions of empaths quietly experience them every single day without having the words to explain what is happening inside them. By the end of this video, many things about your own emotional journey may finally start making sense. And the final phase might completely change the way you see yourself forever. If you connect deeply with emotional psychology, human behavior, and the hidden struggles empaths face behind closed doors, then this channel was made for you. Welcome to the channel. Subscribe now and join a community that understands the emotions most people never talk about. During the first phase of an empath's life, their heart stays completely open to the world. This is the version of the empath that still believes people are mostly good, that love can repair broken behavior, and that patience can heal emotional damage inside others. At this stage, the empath becomes the person everyone runs to during difficult moments. Friends unload their pain onto them. Family members lean on them emotionally. Strangers open up to them faster than expected. And instead of protecting themselves, the empath feels honored to carry other people's emotional weight. They believe helping people gives their life meaning. They believe understanding people deeply is a gift. The problem is that most empaths never realize how dangerous this phase can become because their kindness feels natural to them. While other people notice warning signs, the empath notices pain. While other people walk away, the empath stays and tries harder. They see damaged people and immediately begin searching for reasons behind the behavior. They tell themselves the angry person is secretly hurting. They convince themselves the manipulative person simply needs love. They excuse disrespect because they can sense emotional wounds hiding underneath someone's actions. This is why empaths often ignore red flags longer than everyone else. They do not judge people by actions alone. They judge people by potential. And sometimes that becomes the beginning of their emotional destruction. Many empaths grow up becoming emotional caretakers long before adulthood. Some learn very early that their role was to keep peace inside emotionally unstable environments. Others became highly sensitive to tension because they spent years trying to predict emotional reactions from people around them. Over time, this sensitivity becomes deeply wired into their personality. They begin measuring their value through how useful they are to others emotionally. If someone needs them, they feel important. If someone depends on them, they feel loved. If someone is hurting, they immediately feel responsible for helping. Slowly, their identity becomes connected to emotional sacrifice. That is why so many empaths struggle to say no. They feel guilty resting while someone else suffers. They feel selfish creating boundaries. Even when emotionally exhausted, they continue giving because deep inside, many empaths fear that if they stop helping, they will stop mattering to people. This emotional pattern is rarely visible from the outside because empaths usually hide their own pain extremely well. They become experts at comforting others while quietly neglecting themselves. During this phase, the empath often attracts emotionally wounded people without understanding why. Toxic individuals sense emotional availability very quickly. They notice patience, they notice forgiveness, they notice softness. And because empaths naturally try to understand behavior instead of immediately rejecting it, they become easy emotional targets for people who constantly take without giving anything back. At first, the empath does not notice the imbalance. They continue giving attention, energy, support, reassurance, second chances, and emotional labor. They answer late-night calls. They stay during emotional chaos. They absorb negativity like a sponge. They become the therapist, the fixer, the emotional support system, and sometimes even the emotional punching bag. Yet the empath continues believing things will improve if they just love harder. This phase becomes emotionally addictive because the empath secretly hopes their kindness will eventually be appreciated in the same depth they give it. But many times, appreciation never comes. Instead, the empath slowly becomes emotionally drained while pretending everything is fine. One of the most painful truths about this phase is that empaths usually give from the deepest parts of themselves without realizing most people do not love the same way they do. They assume others feel emotions with equal intensity. They assume others notice emotional effort. They assume loyalty, honesty, and emotional depth naturally matter to everyone. But reality slowly begins teaching them otherwise. Small disappointments begin stacking together quietly. The empath starts noticing they are always the one checking on others first, always the one apologizing first, always the one trying to fix conflicts, always the one sacrificing emotional comfort to keep relationships alive. Yet because empaths fear hurting people, they often suppress their frustrations instead of expressing them. They tell themselves they are overthinking. They convince themselves to stay patient, but emotional exhaustion has already started growing underneath the surface long before they consciously recognize it. As time passes, the empath begins feeling a strange emotional heaviness they cannot fully explain. Their energy disappears faster around certain people. Conversations begin feeling draining instead of meaningful. Situations that once felt rewarding now leave them emotionally empty. Still, they continue overgiving because they believe love means endurance. Many empaths are praised for being selfless during this phase, but deep inside, they are slowly abandoning themselves. They neglect their own emotional needs because they are too focused on rescuing everyone else. They ignore their intuition repeatedly. And perhaps the saddest part is that many empaths secretly believe suffering for others proves their love is real. This mindset keeps them trapped in emotionally unhealthy dynamics much longer than most people would tolerate. The empath also struggles with loneliness during this phase, even while surrounded by people. Everyone knows the empath as the strong listener, the understanding friend, the emotionally mature one, but almost nobody asks who comforts the empath when they break internally. Since empaths naturally hide emotional pain behind calm behavior, people assume they are stronger than they really are. This creates a dangerous emotional imbalance. The empath becomes emotionally available for everyone while receiving very little emotional understanding in return. Over time, this imbalance slowly damages their nervous system, emotional stability, and trust in relationships. Eventually, cracks begin appearing in the empath's emotional world. They start noticing how some people only contact them when they need something. They begin realizing certain individuals never truly cared about their feelings. The empath who once trusted easily now starts overthinking conversations afterward. They replay interactions in their mind. They analyze emotional energy shifts. They begin recognizing manipulation patterns they once ignored. But because this realization feels painful, many empaths resist accepting it at first. They do not want to believe kindness can be exploited. They do not want to believe some people intentionally use emotional softness for personal benefit. Yet life continues teaching the lesson repeatedly until the empath can no longer ignore it. This is where phase 2 quietly begins. The emotional collapse phase does not happen overnight. It builds slowly through emotional betrayal, chronic disappointment, emotional overload, and years of giving without recovery. One day the empath notices they no longer feel emotionally present the way they once did. Their excitement fades. Their emotional energy drops constantly. Conversations feel exhausting. Crowded environments become overwhelming. The empath who once answered everyone immediately now starts disappearing for hours or days because their mind feels emotionally overloaded. This confuses people around them because from the outside, nothing dramatic seems to have changed, but internally, the empath feels like their emotional world is collapsing under invisible pressure. This phase becomes terrifying because the empath starts feeling emotionally numb while still carrying deep emotions underneath. They no longer cry as easily. They stop reacting the same way. They become quieter, more distant, more guarded. Many empaths begin isolating themselves during this period because social interaction feels emotionally dangerous. Their nervous system becomes exhausted from years of absorbing emotional tension from others. Small conflicts suddenly feel unbearable. Loud personalities become draining. Fake conversations become intolerable. The empath begins craving silence because silence feels safer than emotional chaos. One of the darkest parts of phase 2 is that almost nobody notices the empath is breaking emotionally. Since empaths spent years appearing emotionally strong, people assume they are simply becoming colder or antisocial. Friends may accuse them of changing. Family members may complain they became distant. But very few understand the truth. The empath is emotionally burned out. Their mind has spent too many years carrying emotional pain that was never theirs to carry in the first place. Psychologically, long-term emotional overstimulation can create symptoms similar to chronic stress exhaustion. The empath becomes mentally tired even after resting. Their emotional battery no longer recharges the same way. And because many empaths struggle explaining their inner world, they suffer silently while pretending everything is normal. During this phase, trust becomes extremely difficult. The empath begins questioning people constantly. They notice inconsistencies faster. They sense hidden intentions more easily. Their intuition sharpens through pain. What once felt like emotional openness now feels dangerous. They remember every moment they ignored their instincts in the past, every betrayal, every manipulation, every situation where they sacrificed themselves for people who never valued them properly. Those memories slowly change how they interact with the world. The empath stops opening up quickly, stops believing words easily, stops expecting emotional honesty from everyone. This emotional collapse often creates deep identity confusion because the empath no longer recognizes themselves. They miss the old version of who they used to be, the softer version, the endlessly patient version, the emotionally available version. But they also realize that version of themselves suffered constantly. This creates an internal emotional war. Part of them still wants to love people deeply. Another part fears getting emotionally destroyed again, and this inner conflict drains them even more. Many empaths during phase 2 begin feeling emotionally detached from relationships they once fought desperately to keep. They stop chasing people, stop begging for understanding, stop trying to convince others to care. At first, this detachment scares them because they mistake it for emotional coldness, but often it is actually emotional survival. Their mind can no longer handle endless emotional disappointment, so their nervous system begins protecting itself by reducing emotional investment. The empath who once over-explained every feeling now stays silent because they are too tired to translate their emotions anymore. This is also the phase where many empaths begin realizing not everyone deserves access to their emotional energy. That realization changes everything. For most of their life, they believed love should be unconditional. But phase 2 teaches painful emotional boundaries through suffering. They learn that some people enjoy being understood without ever trying to understand others. Some people take emotional support endlessly while giving nothing back. Some people confuse kindness with weakness. And some people only value empaths because of what they provide emotionally. The hardest part is accepting that kindness alone cannot heal unhealthy people. This realization emotionally devastates many empaths because helping others became part of their identity. They truly believed enough love could save relationships, fix emotional wounds, or inspire loyalty. But phase 2 forces them to confront a brutal truth. Some people do not want healing. Some people simply want access to emotional energy without accountability. Once the empath understands this, their entire view of relationships begins changing. The emotional exhaustion during this phase can become so intense that the empath starts disconnecting from their own emotions entirely. They stop sharing personal thoughts, stop expressing vulnerability openly, stop feeling emotionally safe around most people. Even happy moments feel temporary, because deep inside, the empath expects disappointment eventually. Their nervous system remains alert constantly, searching for emotional danger. This silent hyper-awareness becomes mentally exhausting. At the same time, the empath begins noticing how different they feel from everyone else around them. They realize most people do not analyze emotions this deeply. Most people do not absorb tension this intensely. Most people move on from emotional pain faster. This realization creates emotional loneliness that is difficult to explain. The empath feels deeply misunderstood even in close relationships. They crave emotional depth but fear emotional closeness at the same time. They want connection, but connection now feels risky. Phase 2 is where the empath stops trying to save everyone and starts trying to survive. That single shift changes their entire emotional world. Their priorities begin changing slowly. Peace becomes more important than attention. Solitude becomes more comforting than forced connection. Emotional safety becomes more valuable than emotional excitement. The empath who once tolerated draining behavior now becomes emotionally exhausted much faster around unhealthy people. Their tolerance disappears because their mind and body simply cannot carry the same emotional weight anymore. And yet, underneath all the exhaustion, pain, confusion, and emotional withdrawal, something deeper is quietly developing inside the empath, something they cannot fully understand yet. Because even though phase 2 feels like emotional destruction, another transformation has already started beneath the surface, one built from painful awareness, emotional wisdom, and survival. But this is not the end of the empath's story. Phase 3 begins quietly. There is no dramatic moment announcing the change, no sudden breakthrough, no perfect healing. The transformation happens slowly after years of emotional exhaustion, disappointment, betrayal, and inner conflict. One day, the empath simply realizes they cannot continue living the way they used to. Their mind becomes tired of chaos. Their heart becomes tired of carrying people who never carried them back. And their soul becomes tired of confusing emotional suffering with love. This is the phase where the empath finally starts protecting their energy instead of endlessly sacrificing it. Not because they stopped caring about people, but because life forced them to understand that constant emotional self-destruction is not kindness, it is survival damage. For the first time in their life, the empath begins choosing peace over emotional attachment, and that decision changes everything about them. People often misunderstand this version of the empath because they expect the old version to return. They expect the endlessly available listener, the emotionally patient fixer, the person who tolerated disrespect while still giving love. But phase 3 creates a different kind of empath, a quieter one, a more careful one. A person who finally understands the emotional cost of having no boundaries. The empath still feels deeply, still notices emotional shifts, still understands pain hidden behind behavior, but now they also understand something else. Understanding someone's pain does not mean accepting emotional harm from them. That lesson becomes one of the most important emotional awakenings of their entire life. During this phase, the empath becomes much more protective of their emotional space. They stop allowing everyone access to their inner world. They begin paying attention to how people make them feel after interactions, instead of only focusing on how others feel. This shift feels strange at first because empaths spent most of their lives prioritizing other people's emotions above their own. But now their perspective changes. They realize emotional energy is limited, time is limited, mental peace is limited. And giving those things to the wrong people slowly destroys them from the inside. So they become selective, careful, observant. They stop forcing connections that feel emotionally draining. They stop chasing friendships that only survive through their effort. They stop over-explaining themselves to people determined to misunderstand them anyway. One of the biggest changes during phase 3 is silence. The empath becomes quieter, but not because they have nothing to say. They become quieter because they finally understand not everyone deserves access to their deepest thoughts. In earlier phases, they believed vulnerability automatically created closeness. Now they understand vulnerability in the wrong hands becomes emotional exposure. So they speak less, observe more, protect themselves more carefully. And strangely, this silence often makes them appear stronger than ever before. The same people who once ignored the empath's emotional pain suddenly become uncomfortable around their calm distance, because the empath is no longer emotionally easy to control. This version of the empath also stops chasing validation. For years, they searched for emotional reassurance through helping others, being needed, or being emotionally available all the time. They wanted people to recognize their loyalty, appreciate their sacrifices, and value their emotional depth. But phase 3 changes that need completely. The empath slowly stops seeking approval from emotionally inconsistent people. They stop trying to prove their worth through overgiving. They stop shrinking themselves to keep others comfortable. And this emotional independence surprises many people around them because the empath no longer reacts the same way to rejection, criticism, or emotional distance. The detached peace phase is not about becoming emotionally cold. That is what many people misunderstand. The empath still has a soft heart, still feels compassion, still loves deeply, but now their kindness has boundaries attached to it. Before, they gave people unlimited chances because they feared losing connection. Now they understand protecting their peace matters more than keeping every relationship alive. This creates a powerful emotional shift. The empath who once tolerated emotional chaos for years now walks away much faster. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because their nervous system remembers what emotional suffering feels like, and they no longer romanticize pain the way they once did. Healing changes the empath in ways most people cannot understand. In the beginning, they thought healing would make them feel softer, lighter, or emotionally open again. But real healing often looks different. Real healing teaches the empath to recognize manipulation faster, to trust actions more than words, to stop rescuing people who refuse accountability, to stop abandoning themselves for emotional approval. This wisdom can make the empath appear distant to people who only benefited from their lack of boundaries before. Suddenly, the empath says no. Suddenly, they disappear from draining environments. Suddenly, they stop tolerating emotional disrespect quietly. And this change shocks people who became comfortable taking advantage of the empath's emotional generosity. Many empaths during phase 3 begin enjoying solitude in a completely different way. Earlier in life, loneliness felt painful because they constantly searched for emotional connection. But now solitude feels peaceful, safe, predictable. The empath realizes silence heals them more than chaotic relationships ever did. They become more comfortable spending time alone because being alone no longer feels empty. It feels emotionally clean. They no longer need constant attention to feel valuable. They no longer panic when people leave. They no longer chase people who create confusion. Their emotional world becomes calmer because they stop forcing themselves into spaces where they feel emotionally unsafe. There is also a deep emotional sadness hidden inside this phase that many empaths never fully talk about. Part of them mourns the person they used to be. They remember how open their heart once felt, how quickly they trusted, how deeply they loved without fear. And sometimes they miss that innocence, but they also understand that version of themselves survived by ignoring emotional danger repeatedly. The new version may feel more guarded, but it is also wiser, healthier, and emotionally safer. That understanding helps the empath finally stop blaming themselves for changing. One of the most powerful things about phase 3 is that the empath finally learns the difference between empathy and self-sacrifice. Before, they believed love meant enduring emotional pain endlessly. Now they understand real love should not constantly destroy their mental peace. This realization changes how they approach every relationship moving forward. They begin valuing consistency over intensity, emotional safety over emotional excitement, honesty over emotional dependency. And because of this, their entire circle often becomes smaller, but healthier. The detached peace phase also creates a strange reaction in certain people. Some become angry when the empath changes. Some accuse them of becoming cold, selfish, distant, or uncaring. But the truth is much deeper than that. The empath simply stopped allowing unlimited access to their emotional energy. And people who benefited from their weakness often struggle the most with this transformation. They miss the version of the empath that tolerated everything, the version that never said no, the version that carried everyone else while silently destroying themselves. But that version of the empath is gone now. In its place stands someone calmer, more aware, more emotionally intelligent. Someone who still loves deeply but finally understands that protecting inner peace is not selfish. It is necessary. And for the first time in their life, the empath no longer feels guilty for choosing themselves too. The truth is, empaths do not wake up one day and suddenly become distant, quiet, or emotionally guarded. That transformation happens slowly through heartbreak, disappointment, emotional exhaustion, and years of carrying pain that was never theirs to carry. Life changes empaths differently because they feel everything more deeply than most people ever will. Every betrayal stays longer. Every emotional wound cuts deeper. Every moment of being misunderstood leaves a scar that nobody else can see. And over time, those experiences reshape the empath completely. The saddest part about an empath's journey is that life teaches them to stop being the person they once were. The soft version of them, the endlessly patient version, the version that believed love alone could heal everything. But maybe that transformation was never weakness, maybe it was survival. Maybe the empath was never becoming cold at all. Maybe they were finally learning that protecting their peace is just as important as protecting everyone else's feelings. And maybe the strongest empaths are not the ones who feel the most, but the ones who survived feeling too much for too long without losing their soul completely. Some people watching this video are still living in phase 1 right now, giving too much while hoping people will finally love them the same way back. Others are trapped in phase 2, emotionally exhausted, disconnected, and silently breaking while pretending everything is fine. And some have already entered phase 3, where peace matters more than attention and boundaries matter more than approval. No matter which phase you are currently in, one thing remains true: your sensitivity was never a weakness. The world simply forced you to learn hard emotional lessons earlier than most people. So now I want to hear from you. Which phase are you currently living through right now? Share your experience in the comments, because someone reading your story may finally feel understood for the first time in a long time. And if this video spoke to a part of you that most people never understand, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with another empath who needs to hear this today. There are millions of emotionally exhausted people silently fighting battles nobody notices, and sometimes one video can remind them they are not alone.